Hey, what's good? This is Luke from piffriffs.com. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get polished vocals using the Ableton EQ Eight, and I'm going to show you how everything works on that plugin. If you want to download the Ableton project and follow along, you can head to piffriffs.com or follow the link in the description. Alright, so I got a vocal track right here, so I'm going to double click on EQ Eight to load it up. Now, the first thing that I usually do is double click right here to expand this view. I think that's really useful. Alright, so starting from left to right here, analyze, we're not going to use right now, we'll just use it as a default, but just so you know, you can change these parameters to adjust the way that the Spectrum Analyzer responds in real time. So at the bottom we can engage and disengage these different bands, so we have 8 of them, and I'm going to start with the first one here. I'm going to create a high pass filter, so the symbol for that, it looks like this, so we're just going to click here. And what this is going to do is we're going to get rid of any low-end rumble in the vocal. So I'm going to play the vocals back and kind of dial this into taste.
So I'll wait it out, you already have.
Alright, now I'm going to create the second band here. So for this I'm going to use a bell curve, which looks like this. And I just want to point out one useful feature while we're doing this part, this little headphone or audition icon. If we click that, what it'll do is it'll solo the band that we're working with, that we have selected here. So I'll demonstrate that right now. Check it out.
So I'll wait it.
So what we're going to do with this bell curve is we're going to try to find some unpleasant and boxy frequencies in the lower mids and the mids, and we're going to carve them out. So I'm going to show you how that works. There's one other thing that I think is really useful to know, and that is if you're using this view by just clicking and dragging, you can hold down Option to change the resonance. So the resonance is essentially how steep of a curve you're working with. The frequency it represents the frequencies that you're working with on the spectrum. Resonance, we just discussed, is how steep it is. And the gain right here changes how much gain you're adding or subtracting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these functions literally just right here on the visualizer, and I'm going to find some unpleasant frequencies and take them out. Like that. Boxy. I'm going to enable 3. It's a bell already. Once again, using Option to make a more narrow band, and I'm going to sweep around here and see what it sounds like.
So I'll wait it out, you already.
I'm going to pull that out. Great. Keep going. I'm going to do another one. Switch this to a bell.
So I'll wait it out, you already had me.
Cool. So we just did some basic subtractive EQing to the vocal. And the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some air on the top end. So I'm going to enable 8, turn this into a high shelf, and we're going to add air up here.
So I'll wait it out, you already have.
Cool. So I went through what all these knobs do: frequency, gain, resonance. We can change the type of filter here. Now, one other thing I'd like to talk about. If you add too much high frequency, you can get a lot of sibilance depending on the recording and the singer that you're working with. So this can be a problem. We're going to talk about de-essing in a different video. You can do it using a plugin, you can do it using a multi-band compressor, and you can just do it manually by audio editing. So that's going to be something that you want to try to avoid because it's very unpleasant sounding. But for right now, we're good here. Now, there's a couple other features that I'd like to discuss on this plugin. We can change the mode here. Stereo is what most people use, but if you want to use LR, that stands for left and right, so you can have 2 separate EQ curves for the left channel and the right channel, so that's really interesting. You can also do mid and side, which is the middle versus the sides that you can EQ differently. I'm going to leave this in stereo. Adaptive resonance or adapt Q, it makes the resonance more precise as you do more extreme gain addition or reduction, so it kind of simulates more of like an analog style EQ. And if you turn it off, as I'll show you right here, that goes away, so it kind of stays the same. So we're just going to leave it on. You can play with that. Scale, we'll take the whole curve and scale it. So that's really useful. I'm going to leave it at 100. And gain, we can add or subtract gain depending on whether or not we're losing any volume during the EQ process. So that's a general overview of how to use this plugin. And I wanted to note a couple things here in conclusion just about EQing in general. So as you gain more experience producing and mixing, you'll get a feel for when you may or may not want to cut or boost frequencies. So as you get more experience, you'll kind of be able to determine that. It always varies depending on what your audio sounds like and also what styles of music you're making. So there's no one approach to this by any means. And different EQ plugins all function and sound very different. So my suggestion would be to learn how to use one or two really, really precisely. It's more valuable, in my opinion, than just having like a million plugins. So you really want to use your EQ to the full extent and know how to dial in anything that you want. I think that's a great way to approach it. You may find that you prefer precise versus broad strokes for certain instruments. So this is very, very fine subtractive EQing, but for certain things like guitars or whatever, you may want to use broader strokes. So that's something to mess around with. You may also find you prefer subtractive versus additive EQing for certain tasks and for certain instruments. So you want to mess around with that and see what works for you, depending on your setup, your style of music, and all that. You may also mess around with using EQ before or after compression or both. So just one note, and I mentioned this extensively in the compression video, but compression will accentuate any nuance in it. So if it's not sounding good, it's going to bring that all out. Or if it's EQ'd very poorly, it's going to bring that out too. So you need to be extra careful when you're compressing. And one other thing is when you're learning compression, it's really nice to kind of solo the instrument and listen to it by itself because it makes everything pretty obvious. But you're definitely going to want to mess around with EQing in the mix. So you can EQ with everything happening at once and without it, flip between. So you can definitely mess around with that and sort of learn how to fit everything in the song and make it gel together using EQ. So I hope that was helpful. Once again, check out piffriffs.com for dope samples. We have tutorials, all kinds of loops and different instruments. And yeah, check it out up there. Let me know in the comments if this was helpful. And yeah, I'll catch you guys soon. Thank you.